What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man. And I am finally back here with a part 8 of What If Deku Was a Storm Wolf. And the first thing I'd like to do is apologize. I recently listened to the part 7, and I realized that at the near end of the video, I forgot to include a certain file. So, I'm sorry about the confusion. So let me allow you. Let's go ahead and get into the story, but first, let's hear about the part that I missed. This happened just as Denki woke up from his nightmare. The sound of the gunshot startled Denki awake. He breathed heavily for a few seconds. What? What the hell was that? Suddenly, from out of nowhere, Denki's house was lit with that of a light blue aura, and then it fades away. What was that? Suddenly, the TV in Denki's room flew off of its shelf and into the wall. It then completely broke through and ended up outside, just tumbling down the street. Before Denki could even think what was going on, the wall behind him caved in, and he jumped out of the way of what appeared to be a lamppost. Denki quickly ran out of his room and looked for his parents. They were just downstairs looking for him. They then quickly made it outside, and they saw what seemed to be a swarm of metal objects just flying in one direction. It almost looked like a tornado was about to form. "What is happening?" said Father. Before they could think, the sound of a loud screeching can be heard, and they turn around to see a bunch of cars hurtling towards them. They quickly move out of the way, and they ran and they took shelter in a place where it had no metal objects. A few hours would pass, and the family would wake up, and they would head outside to see that buildings were destroyed, cars were in random spots of the road. It just looked like everything was damaged, like God attacked them. People were talking amongst themselves. They would talk about rumors of terrorism and how many people were hospitalized, but luckily no one had died. People had called this unfortunate event the pull. Reasons is because the attack only seems to have attracted certain metal objects such as iron, nickel, and cobalt, all of which were all of which had attractive magnetic poles, hence the word pole. Suddenly, a thought would come to Denki's mind about that. He remembered that Izuku had a sort of metal kinesis quirk. But is he okay? Was that Izuku who did that? Even with all this ramblingness that's going on, school was still able to go on, which is very strange. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the story. This is What If Deku Was a Storm Wolf, Part 8. Hope you all enjoy. Where we last left off, Izuku had left his family to find out more about his mother, Inko Midoriya, who, in the beginning, sacrificed herself to save her son's life. When Izuku came back to town, he saved his brother Denki from the hero killer Stain, who knew Izuku. How, you all might be wondering? Well, let's get into the story and find out. This is What If Deku Was a Storm Wolf. Excuse me. In this story, we'll be changing perspective views from Denki to Izuku on the same day that he left the hospital without telling his family. As he is walking out of the hospital, he enters a bus, Izuku looking at the nearly setted sun that sat on the horizon, already having second thoughts about leaving, but his determination to learn more about his mother kept him wanting to go. And just as Izuku reaches the outskirts of his hometown, he hears the cries of his brother calling his name. Izuku was tempted to go and comfort his grieving brother, but to his better judgment, he went ahead and left. He entered a wooden area, and just as he enters a few feet in, he then strips himself down to his underpants, and he looks out to the wooden area, takes in a deep breath, and says, "Okay, here I go." He starts running, and then he jumps into the air, turning into his tundra wolf form, and he keeps running. Okay, so what I plan on doing is to find a wolf pack and see if they know anyone who is in relation or know anything about Inko Midoriya. If I run into any trouble between me and another animal, my action is to run. I did not come here for a fight. Wait, can I even talk to animals? Well, I guess we're about to find out. And so he does. He eventually does find another wolf pack, and to his surprise, he can talk to them. He would pass many other wolf packs and asking them the same question if they knew anything about a woman by the name of Inko Midoriya, to which all of them said no, that they didn't. But in one group, Izuku was actually challenged by the pack leader, but Izuku would refuse. But the alpha leader would go on to tell Izuku that he doesn't have a choice. They would all surround Izuku, demanding him that they fight their leader. But Izuku refused once again, and the alpha leader said, "Have it your way." Quickly lunging at Izuku, Izuku then quickly zooms past him, running away. Soon, darkness comes, and Izuku finds an area to rest his feet. He already starts having second thoughts and just wanting to go home, but he kept telling himself no, that he has to do this. Izuku had a hard time relaxing that night. He had never slept outside before. His animal instincts kicked in and he felt like he was surrounded by other predators that wanted him dead. And soon, Izuku finds himself in the spirit realm in the presence of the previous users of One For All, to inform him that him and his brother will soon unlock Black Whip. It's the next day, and Izuku is out and approaches another wolf pack, and they get kind of aggressive towards him, but Izuku tells them that he's not there to challenge anyone. He just wants to know if anyone knew anything or have any connections to a woman by the name of Inko Midoriya. Izuku's surprised, for they actually did know something. Izuku would say, What do you know? They go on to tell Izuku about Inko's father, and that they are constantly moving, but the last time that they saw them was a few miles north. Izuku thanked them and headed in that direction. After a while of dragging himself around, Izuku comes across nothing. The sun was almost setting, and Izuku was getting more and more frustrated. Damn it! I'm never going to find them, especially if they keep moving. I should just give up. Suddenly, from the darkness, Izuku hears faint howling, but it was squeaky and high-pitched. Izuku could tell by the howls that it was a howl of distress. He follows the sound and comes across a bear cornering a little tundra wolf cub just like him. Without even thinking, Izuku leaped in, challenging the bear, exposing his teeth and raising the hair on the back of his head. The bear roars back at Izuku louder, and the two lunge at each other, and Izuku manages to get a biting grip on the bear's neck. And the bear would start clawing and scratching at Izuku's back, trying to get him off. Suddenly, Izuku felt a splatter of blood in his face, but it wasn't the bear's. He could tell by the scent that it was his own. Out of curiosity, he looks at the bite mark, which loosens his grip, and the bear quickly slaps him off of him. Izuku looked at his injuries and noticed that it doesn't hurt for some reason. What the hell is going on? He doesn't have much time to think about it, for the bear quickly lunged at Izuku, and Izuku said, "I have no other choice then. I have to use my quirk." Izuku starts letting electricity flow throughout his entire body, and he zooms at his opponent. He then leaps into the air, and the bear smacks him down to the ground, and Izuku quickly returned to his paws. He getting more and more aggressive, and it is at this point Izuku is using this new ability that he had no idea that he could do, which he is able to project his actions onto the thundery clouds. In this point, Denki is seeing what is going on. With electricity continuously emanating out of his body, Izuku's fight continued. Izuku would blast electricity at the bear, which hurt the bear, making it run away. Izuku turns around to check the wolf cub. It slowly comes out of its hiding spot, revealing itself. Izuku starts feeling lightheaded and dizzy. He starts stumbling around with his eyelids slowly closing. Hey, you look just like... And then he passes out. And all of a sudden, he finds himself in the spirit world, in his human form. Izuku sees Denki, and they would have the same conversation with him saying that it's not his fault, and to say hi to his friends for him, and that he's okay. Soon, Izuku would wake up in his body and find himself in a hole in the ground, with the ray of the sunlight hitting him in the face. With aloe vera plants covering his wounds. Whoa. Oh, what the heck just happened? Where am I? Wolfie Izuku will begin to crawl out of the den and will be greeted by a group of wolves just like him. Hey there, take it easy there. You're hurt really bad. But you don't seem to be bothered by it. Izuku says, yeah, it's a long story. Wait, what about that little cub? Are they okay? Yes, he is fine. And that was my son. Thank you for protecting him. It's no problem. The wolves then that surrounded Izuku started to slowly lean in closer, with one of them saying, you look kind of familiar. It's funny that you say that, because I came here looking for answers. Well, tell us what it is you seek. I'm looking for anyone who knows or has any sort of relation to a woman by the name of Inko Midoriya. They all gasp and back away, one of them saying, how do you know that name? Before Izuku could answer, a manly voice can be heard. Who speaks of my daughter's name? They all move aside, revealing their alpha leader of the pack. He had gray fur all over his body, and he was mildly muscular than the rest of them. But the thing that stood out most about him was this scar, this 5-fingered scar that went around his eye and to the left side of his face, turning from the right side. In other words, like slashed at an angle, as if some animal slashed at an angle. He approaches Izuku and looks deep into his eyes. Izuku was a bit intimidated, but the alpha leader speaks. Who are you? And how do you know that name? Izuku struggles to get the words out, but he manages to say, she was your daughter? Well, I guess that makes you my grandfather. When he heard that, his eyes widened of astonishment. Wait, she had a child? When? With who? How old is he? The wolves around them would start asking the same questions, with the alpha leader standing there with a surprised look on his face, You're my grandson? If what you say is true, that Inko was your daughter, then yes. Everyone freezes for a moment until the alpha leader tells everyone to stay here and that he's going to take Izuku somewhere to have a private talk with him. Down by a lake, the water was smooth and still, with not a single wave to be seen, reflecting the sky as if it was a mirror. Izuku looks out at the huge body of water and spoke about how beautiful it looks. The alpha leader speaks. You really are the son of my daughter, Inko? Yes, sir. I found out about her about a few weeks ago, actually. The Alpha Leader says, "This is really amazing. Tell me everything there is to know about you. Like, how old are you, and when's your birthday, and where's your mother?" When he mentioned his mother, Izuku's enthusiastic expression faded to a sad frown. "What? What's wrong?" asked the Alpha Leader. Izuku goes on to tell his grandfather about his mother's tragic demise on the night of his birth. The Alpha Leader was shocked by the news of his daughter's passing, and in some ways he feels responsible for it. He would go on to tell Izuku about how his mother wanted to explore the world, and she thought that there was more to life than what our culture had to offer. "But wait," said the grandpa. "Wait, I'm sorry. But wait, Grandpa. How is it that she and I are able to change into wolves? Can you do it as well?" "Well, yes, I can. And there is actually a story to that. It's something that everyone in our family is able to do. You see, hundreds of years ago, the gods saw that hunters were getting more and more relentless, and so your great grandmother asked the gods to allow us to transfigurate into humans, or humanoid beings, at our own will. The only way to tell the difference between wolf people and ordinary people is that wolf people maintain their ears and tails." Izuku would go on to explain that when he turns into his human form, he doesn't have the ears and the tail. He looks more like the human, but he just assumes that since his father was human, that he has more of his genes. Therefore, takes away the ears and the tail on that one. After chatting for a while about Izuku's life, Izuku asks if he could see his grandfather's humanoid form. His grandfather was a bit hesitant, but agreed. He tells Izuku to wait there while he went and got a loincloth to cover himself up. When he came back in his humanoid form, he was mildly muscular for an old man. He had long green hair, but his scar on his face was still very much visible. Izuku said, "Wow, now I know where the green hair comes from." Izuku, well, excuse me, soon after the two would talk and Izuku would show his grandfather his human form, and immediately he saw his daughter's eyes within him. The two embraced each other. And time would pass, and Izuku would be introduced to the rest of his family members, and throws a small celebration in his arrival. But during their celebration, Grandfather would approach Izuku and ask him how he found out about his mother if he died at infancy. To which he would explain that he died himself and went to heaven and saw her. Izuku's grandfather was surprised at the answer. "Wait, you died?" "Yes, and it was horrible, and I still can remember it. It's like a nightmare that just keeps playing in my head. I could still remember it as if it was yesterday. You see, I drowned, and I believe my soul flew up to the sky and into the sun, and suddenly I found myself in a meadow with just a few hills surrounding me and the oak leaves just tapping at my feet in the wind. The sun was just on the horizon, and there I saw her, a woman with long green hair staring at the sun. And for some reason, I was drawn to her. When she saw me, she was shocked as if she had seen a ghost. It wasn't until she told me that I was her son that it was much more than that." Izuku brings himself back to reality. "I'm sorry, sometimes I drift off when I'm too deep in thought. Izuku looks at his grandfather, who had a surprised look on his face. What's the matter? You saw her, and you came back? Yeah, she told me that I still had a chance to go home. Interesting. How so? Well, you see, Izuku, there was something else that you needed to know, but I was too scared to tell you. Okay, here you go. You see, when the gods gave us our abilities to shapeshift, there was a small price that came with it. You see, for the past 100 years, our family has died in mysterious ways. Izuku was bewildered by this answer. He had just heard of his grandfather going... Excuse me. Izuku was bewildered by this answer that his grandfather just told him of. Grandfather goes into details about how his relatives have died, what with one dying in a flood and another one dying in their sleep, and most recently, his grandmother, who died saving a wolf cub from a group of venomous snakes. But the thing that they all had in common was on the day of their death, they kept mentioning that they saw a humanoid man with red clothes and red skin. He had the face of a skeleton, but the eyes were still able to see. For a long time, we assumed that that thing had something to do with the curse. Some sort of sign that whoever saw him next would die. Did you see such a thing when you died, Izuku? Izuku thinks, and he can't recall seeing the red man when he died. Interesting. Well, at least you're still here, and I'm grateful for that. You're what's left of my true family, and I'm going to cherish every moment that we have. Izuku would say, wait, your true family? Like, are the rest of these wolves not related to us? Sadly, no. We are what's left of our own bloodline. See, one day I came to them and they were in need of a leader. And, well, I took them in. But they don't have to be related to you, Izuku, to be family. If they care about you, that's the family that you have earned. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Excuse me, I had a phone call. But anyway, let's get back into the story. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. But right now, we need to get ready to leave in the morning. But wait, said Izuku. There's another thing I want to ask. Another pack from a few miles from here said that you guys are constantly moving. Why is that? Izuku's grandfather would go on to tell Izuku that a mountain lion by the name of Namaku, they are being hunted by him. You see, there was this thing that they tried to make a deal with him, but things went sideways and he ended up attacking them. And I took one of his eyes, he took one of mine. Now he's hunting us. Izuku could tell just by the look on his grandfather's face that there's something else. He's scared. And he asks him a very important question. Grandfather, did you see the red man? A moment of silence goes by and his grandfather says yes. Izuku's heart sank when he heard his grandfather answer yes to that. There's got to be something we can do to stop this. Maybe I can help. I'm sorry, Izuku, but you can't. He's too powerful. I've seen him do godly things. Really? Like what? Well, somehow, he is able to manipulate the earth and bend it at his will. He is able to lift a piece of rock from the ground without even touching it. And he also can roar at a loud frequency that can burst our eardrums if we are too close. Also, he is very strong. I've seen the power of his hit. One hit, and you die. Izuku thinks to himself, It sounds like he has an arsenal of quirks. But how is it that one animal could have so much power? Well, it's not uncommon that some people, even animals, could have more than 2 quirks, but 3? But grandfather, perhaps I can beat him. I'm very strong too, and I also have great power. That could definitely outduel his. Really? You have godlike powers too? Yes. Izuku would go on to explain the abilities that Namaku has that are called quirks, and lays down a few abilities that he has himself, such as electricity manipulation and a strength enhancement, which we all know is one for all. Grandfather was intrigued by this and asks Izuku if he could show off his powers, but Izuku asks for a wider space and a loincloth so that he could do it in his human form. He shows his family members his electrical powers, doing all the tricks that he has learned over the years. He also shows them the power of One for All, shooting an air attack into the clouds and making the clouds split into a circle. His family was amazed of what they were seeing and actually thought that they had a fighting chance, knowing that they had Izuku on their side. Grandfather allows Izuku to try and take on Namaku, but first he wants to see how well he does in a fight. And so he tests Izuku and he gets back into his wolf form, so this could be a bit more fair. Getting his wolf pack to attack Izuku, but obviously not hurt him. They all lunge at him, but in a flash, Izuku takes them all down. By the way, did I forget to mention that I'm really fast? Excuse me. Grandfather was even more amazed than before and announces that everything that and tells everyone that soon they will run no longer, for Izuku will kill Namaku. Wait, kill Grandfather? I don't want to kill him or anyone, but you have to. It's the only way to end all of this. But Grandfather, I've never killed anyone or anything before. Can I just show him my powers and scare him and tell him to stay away from you guys? Or no, you have to finish him, or otherwise he'll just come back. It's the only way, he said in an angered voice. Izuku freezes and says, I'm going to need some time to myself. He walks off, and Izuku finds himself next to the steady river. Or to the steady lake, excuse me. He looks down at his reflections with the words of his grandfather murmuring in his head. I can't kill. Heroes don't kill. But they need me. I feel so lost. Grandfather approaches Izuku and says, I'm sorry, Izuku. I didn't mean to get mad at you. I thought that maybe I had a chance to escape this curse. So close to stop everyone from running that I let all my frustration and anger out on my only grandson, the only family that I really have left. I am so sorry, Izuku. It's clear that it's not in your DNA to kill anything. And I won't make you do anything that you don't want to do. It's okay, Grandfather. I forgive you. Thanks. Anyway, the best thing that we can do now is to keep running. We'll start moving first thing in the morning. But Grandfather, I can't stay with you. Why not? Asked Grandfather. Because I already have another family that I need to get back to. Yes, the Kaminari family, you've mentioned them. They are great people for looking after you and raising you decently. Not in the way that I do, but at least you turned out great. Yeah, my main goal was to come out here and to find out more about my mother, and I've learned so much about her, but learning too much, especially about the family curse, not knowing what day will be my last. I know I'm your grandson, but it's best that I go back to my family. Grandfather looks to the ground out of sadness and says, "It's fine. I understand. You spent most of your life not knowing the truth about your roots, and you bit off more than you can chew. By the most, I am glad to have met you, Izuku, though I am frightened that this may be the last time that we'll see each other. It's been an honor to have met you. Please stay safe out there." Grandfather starts walking away. While Izuku is thinking, he stops him, telling him that if he's going to do this, then they're going to need to teach him how to do it. A smile comes across his grandfather's face, and soon they train Izuku. For days, he would watch the pack hunt and kill their targets. He would learn to always go for a leg so that the target cannot get away, and then to go for the throat to finish them off. After a few days of watching, Grandfather would tell Izuku that it's time that he go hunting on his own. Soon, Izuku is walking around looking for prey. He comes across a very large moose eating. He hides behind a shrub, just barely getting spotted by the moose. Izuku starts to reflect on his lessons that he had learned. Don't show fear, for your prey may use it against you. Take out a leg, and then go for the throat. Taking a deep breath, Izuku walks out of his hiding spot and then confronts the moose. The two would stare intensely at each other, and after a few seconds, the moose would go back to eating. Izuku was confused. Wait, aren't you gonna challenge me or run? No. Why not? Because there's no point. What do you mean? When Izuku asked that, the moose looked back up at him. His eyes were a deep black abyss. I'm saying it's futile to even try. We are animals in a circle of life, an endless circle that goes on until there is nothing left. You kill me, you eat, you live another day. But what happens when there is nothing left? Will you resort to cannibalism? Would you lay on the ground as the insects feast on your body, as you slowly decay into dust and bones? Soon the entire earth will be a barren wasteland. There will be nothing left, no organic life, no inorganic life. Just a pile of dirt until the sun blows up. I have accepted my fate that death is coming for me. Or should I say, it's right in front of me. If you are going to kill me, then kill me. If not, let someone else do it. I don't care. The moose then goes back to eating, and Izuku was so muddled by the moose's words. What was going through that moose's mind when he said that? He was willing to have a fight on his hands, but after hearing that, he doesn't know if he wants to do this anymore. Nonetheless, Izuku had to think about his family and his grandfather. He had to be ready to face off against his true opponent if he's going to save his grandfather's life. And so, reading himself And so readying himself, Izuku then lunges and takes a leg out from the moose. The moose then lets out a scream of pain and it falls to the ground, not even trying to fight back, but just continuously screaming in agony. The sound hurt Izuku, but he knew that he couldn't stop, because if he did, and this was a real battle, he would most likely be taken down. And so, going for each of the limbs, the moose had Izuku took all of its legs out. Blood was splattered all over the ground, and the moose just laid there, breathing heavily. Izuku, now standing over his target, looks deep into its black abyss eyes, hesitant to finish it off, but then he heard, "Finish what you started." Izuku turns around and he sees his grandfather standing there. Izuku repeatedly looked back and forth from his grandfather to the moose. He then lunges at the moose and finishes it off, going for the throat. Izuku drags his dead prey back to the group, and everyone applauds Izuku, congratulating him on his first hunt. And even though Izuku was smiling on the surface, deep down he felt horrible for what he had done. He makes his way down to the lake while everyone else stayed and feast upon the corpse of the moose. Izuku, looking down at his reflection, and asked himself, is he really ready to do this? And it was at that moment he thought, what would Denki do? Suddenly, he hears his grandfather behind him. I know it was hard, but that's just how life works for us. I know. Now, Izuku, you don't have to do it. No, it's just, I'm worried about what he will have. What if I'm not strong enough? Izuku, I know you're stronger. Don't worry. If you just stick to the plan, we could beat him. You just have to put your trust in me and everyone here. Okay? Izuku nodded his head. Okay. It's the next day. The sun was just overhead. Wolfie Izuku was running towards the mountains, ready for his fight. His heart was racing, wondering if he'll be able to save his grandfather from his untimely demise, or will he fall trying? But he couldn't think about that right now. He had to keep his head steady and focus. Soon, Izuku entered the cave near the mountains, with only the light of the sun lighting his trail, but only so far. But soon, his vision adjusted to the dark. He walks deeper and then deeper into the cave, and then he heard a voice. Is someone there? Izuku remained silent. Oh, come on. I know I heard something. Izuku looks to his surroundings, trying to find out where Namaku could be, but his voice was echoing all around the room. It was hard to tell where he might be. And if he wasn't going to come out, then he was going to have to draw him out. Namaku, I've come for you. Oh, is that so? Well, please, tell me why. Why is it that you choose death? Do you really think that you could defeat me? Or is it that you're stupid as well as brave for even trying? I want to challenge you because you dared to hunt my family. I'm looking to help settle their fears. Namaku spoke again. Oh, really? He sounded closer, as if he was circling Izuku. Oh, you must be one of the tundra wolves. Yes, I am hunting them for what they did to me. Izuku looked around as if Namaku was getting closer and closer. It was almost as if he was talking into his ear. Izuku joltingly turns around, for he heard his voice right behind him. He saw his shadowy figure. Why don't you take a closer look and see for yourself? Izuku spots him in the darkness, standing there just a foot away from him. He looks and he sees his face and saw a scar just over his eye that healed it shut. My goodness, my grandfather really did a number on you. Namaku did not take kindly to those words, and his jaw clenched and he started lunging at Izuku, knocking him to the ground, landing on top of him. Izuku breathes heavily out of fear, looking into Namaku's remaining eye that almost looked like a bottomless pit, just like the moose's. Namaku then said, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to go after the rest of your family, including your grandfather, and I'm going to end his bloodline forever. Izuku's fear was replaced by anger, and he shoots Namaku in the chest, causing him to fly off of him, and Izuku quickly returns to his feet and says, You will do no such thing. I will kill you before I let that happen. Namaku gets up, with smoke emanating off of his body from the electrical shock. I see. So, you have godlike gifts as well. I guess it's time that I show you what I got. Namaku roars loudly, so loud that Izuku had to crouch down and cover his ears with his paws in order to block out the noise. Namaku seizes his opportunity and he attacks. He lunges at Izuku, but Izuku dodges, and when Namaku landed, the earth underneath him cracked from his weight. As their fight continues, Namaku would try to get close to Izuku, but Izuku would hit him with a barrage of punches. Surprisingly enough, Namaku had the body of a warrior and fought through the pain. So, after getting tired of being hit with electricity, Namaku decided to use another part of his quirks. Suddenly, Izuku hears rumbling noises behind him, but there's nothing there. And then, out of nowhere, a large strand of earth comes from up above with the large strand of earth coming towards him, and he quickly dodges, just barely able to get out of the way. This goes on for a while, with Izuku having to dodge pillar to pillar of earth that tried to come near him, and then he realized that he's running out of space, and then he thinks about it. If Namaku is able to control the earth from above and below, then I think it's about time that he takes this fight outside. And so, reverting back to his human form, Izuku powers up One for All, with colorful electricity surfing throughout all of his body. Through the light, Namaku is able to see his true form. Wait, you are man? He hates men. Izuku then swings his fists up, and then, I kid you not, blows the roof off of the cave that they were in, reducing Namaku's earthbending abilities. What the hell are you? Asked Namaku. Izuku, while in his human form, and the colorful electricity still emanating throughout his entire body, his irises start to glow yellow, with a smile coming across his face, and he says, I am God. And just a quick FYI, this is off script, but after a while of thinking about this, I was thinking about calling that mode that Izuku and Denki unlocked when they were fighting their bullies, God mode. We're going to call it God mode from now on. So anyway, he activates God mode. Suddenly, Izuku explodes with a sort of force that's almost as similar to when he and Denki's quirk first activated. Rocks were starting to float all around Izuku, and he started floating in the air. His hair was moving all around as if he was underneath water. He slowly turns back to his wolf form and uses the electrical powers at the same time. And with it, he then uses his super speed, quickly attacking Namaku relentlessly, biting him and just giving him the old 1-2. What am I saying? Anyway, He's doing all the techniques that his grandfather had taught him, as well as all the other techniques that he's learned over the years. He takes out one of Namaku's legs and then another. Namaku would try to get away, but with the limp in his legs and Izuku's speed, he just couldn't see that happening. Izuku would deliver a blow that would put Namaku down. Izuku stops what he's doing, with his hair going back to normal, the electricity around his body fading away, and his iris is going back to normal as well. Namaku, on the ground, exhausted and unable to move. Wolfie Izuku then planted a deep bite on his lower spine. He bit on him so hard that Namaku let out a loud roar that was heard that echoed throughout the skies. Excuse all the muttering and stumbling. Izuku bit down harder and harder until he heard a loud crack. He severed Namaku's spinal cord, paralyzing him from the neck down. He explained this to him, and Namaku just stares at him connivingly. This fight is over, Namaku. I'm going to leave you here. Goodbye. Izuku starts walking away, but then Namaku mumbles something that caught Izuku's attention. What did you say? He mumbles again, and he leans in a bit closer, and he hears, "Come closer." Izuku was hesitant, but he had his left ear inches away from Namaku's mouth, and he heard clear as day, "You should have gone for the neck." He lets out the loudest roar that he could muster into Izuku's ear, and Izuku quickly jumps back, and even though Izuku can't feel pain, his brain was rattled, and his vision was blurry, and he felt off balance and stumbled all over the place. But the one thing that got Izuku's attention was the blood that was dripping from the left side of his face. And so, turning back to his human form, he quickly then raises a hand up towards the left side of his ear, and he looks and sees that it was blood, his own blood, and he comes to the shocking understanding that Namaku had ruptured one of his eardrums, therefore permanently deafening him in his left ear. While he was distracted, Namaku took action. Using his rock-bending abilities, he levitated a few small rocks into the air, and then painful as it looks, he couldn't feel this, but painfully piercing those small rocks into his limbs, helping him up, giving off the illusion that he is able to walk again. Izuku, coming out, regaining his composure, looks up at a standing Namaku. What the? Oh! Izuku falls into a hole that was made by Namaku with his earthbending abilities. The hole was about 30 feet deep. He looks down at his leg and he sees that it was twisted the wrong way. Therefore, he had twisted one of his ankles. He looks up at the hole where the sun shined, and he sees Namaku standing there, mocking and laughing at him. Izuku would expose his teeth while grunting, and he would try to climb out, still in his human form. But Namaku would say, "No, no, no, no you don't." And he would let out a loud roar directly into the hole that Izuku was. Izuku's brain was rattled, and he lost all feeling in his hands for a second, going numb. He falls back into the hole, and Namaku would then say, "Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you, Wolfie boy, but now I'm afraid this is where you die. Don't worry, I'll give you a proper burial." Namaku then struggles to raise one paw up, and then a whole bunch of large, small, and medium rocks started to float over the hole that Izuku was in. Izuku tries to shoot electricity at him, but that only got him like a few seconds. He tries to use one for all, but with each attempt that he does, it would cause the walls around him to crumble, and if he didn't stop, the walls around him would break and it would bury him anyway. There was nothing that he could do. He couldn't even use his super speed because the walls were too steep. If he would try, it wouldn't do anything. It would just exhaust him. All he could do was watch as he looks into the eyes of Namaku. The rocks then fall into the hole and it buries Izuku. It's quiet for a few seconds, and Namaku thinks that he is victorious. And he begins to stumble off to rest and work on his new way of moving. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. Looking to the spot where he buried Izuku, the rocks start shaking violently. No way. He's still... Before Namaku could finish that sentence, the rocks that were once in the hole exploded outwards, and what looks like black tendrils came out from the ground underneath them and pulled out Izuku. He stands there, floating in the center of all this power that surrounded him. Izuku looks down at his hand with Black Whip, and he says to himself, I don't know how this works, but here we go. With fury in his eyes, he then swung his hand with the Black Whip at Namaku, and it relentlessly started beating him, slapping him all over the place. But then Izuku began to lose control of Black Whip, and it starts smashing the forest, knocking down trees, scaring away animals, even hitting some here and there. Izuku yells out, no, no, no! But he couldn't control it. Then he hears the voice of Banjo telling him to calm down, that if he calms down, Black Whip will settle. But it doesn't work. Izuku just screams in agony, and he sees Black Whip swinging in one direction and sees a large tree tumbling over, with a crescent-eatus bird falling to the ground, with 3 of its eggs falling next to it. Izuku sees this, and he yells, no! And then he reaches out with his hand that had Black Whip, and then everything settles down. Black Whip slowly retreats back into Izuku's body, and it was able to catch the bird and the 3 eggs. Holding the 3 eggs in one hand and the red-faced bird in the other, Izuku starts to sigh and tear up. He starts weeping to himself that he's sorry and that he didn't mean to do this. Izuku then hears maniacal laughing from behind him. He turns around and sees a bloody and beaten Namaku. Izuku approaches him, and Namaku says, I know that I'm some sort of apex predator, but what you did was downright evil. I could even call you a true demon for what you did. I may hunt, but at least I don't destroy other animals' habitat and kill just for the sake of doing it. Look around you, boy. Look at all the death and destruction that you have caused, and you're gonna have to deal with that for the rest of your life. Good luck sleeping at night. Izuku looks down at the dead bird and its 3 eggs and vowed to take care of the eggs until they are hatched and able to fly. Namaku continued to taunt Izuku, but then Izuku said, I've had just about enough of you. He then hears his grandfather in the distance, and he says, I was just going to leave you here, but I think I'm going to let them take care of you instead. He then puts the dead bird down and then activates Black Whip in his available hand, and then he swipes it towards Namaku, causing the Black Whip to wrap around him, and then, with one great swoop, he then flings Namaku in the direction of his current family. He lands there, just on the verge of passing out, as he looks into the eyes of Izuku's grandfather. We fade to black. Soon, Izuku makes it back to the pack. Some of them were still feasting on the corpse of Namaku. Grandfather approached Izuku in his human form and congratulated Izuku on his victory. When he sees Izuku looking down at 2 eggs and the sad look on his face, he almost instantly understands what happened. Hey kid, it's going to be okay. Izuku falls, but his grandfather catches him. He then looks closer at Izuku and sees that his left ear was bleeding and his foot was twisted. It's okay, kid. We're gonna get you the best help. Soon, Izuku passes out and he wakes up a few hours later. The sun had went down and the moon and a crescent moon was up. There was a bonfire just outside, and another wolf came in and explained to Izuku about his situation, explaining that his left eardrum had ruptured and that he had a few broken bones, and that they were successful enough to fix his leg. Izuku's first question was, where were the eggs? To which they were right next to him. He then gets up and takes the eggs with him outside, and he comes across his grandfather, who was still in his human form, who thanked Izuku for his help. He notices that Izuku was still feeling down and bummed out about what he had done, but his grandfather comforts him, assuring him that everything will be okay. Izuku smiles and he says, "Yeah, you're right. You know, at least I changed your fate and that you won't die anytime soon. Yeah, you're right." And Suddenly, grandfather looks in a direction and his eyes start to shake rapidly. It's almost as if he's seeing a ghost. Izuku looks in the same direction, but there's nothing there and he can't smell anyone there. Grandfather, what's wrong? Izuku, I see him. The red man. To which his vision, he did see the red man. He was wearing a suit of red, and his skull was also red as the same blood that flows through the veins of living beings. No, it can't be. Namaku's gone. Grandfather, listen, I'll stay and protect you. Grandfather, look at me. It's going to be okay. Suddenly, electricity started emanating out of thin air just a few feet of where they were standing. And suddenly, the electricity started throbbing with a small light in the center, and that light expanded outwards into a large circle. And then, there was a shadowy figure that was seen in a running position. It ran straight at them, and when it came through, it let out a large explosion that blew Izuku and everyone else back, putting the fire out. And there, everyone sees a man standing in a straight line where fire was on the ground, as if he had to stop at a high speed in order to make that happen. He wore a black robe and wore black Timberland shoes. He had a hoodie covering his head so no one was able to see his face. He was smoking from the intense heat around him, and he was missing a right arm. The tension in the environment grows as he slowly stands up straight and tall, looking at Izuku's grandfather. He slowly reaches to his side and pulls out what looks like a gun from the 1720s. If I had to way to describe the details of it, I'd say it looked more like a Queen Anne pistol. Izuku tries to usher in to stop this, but his grandfather yelled at him, "No!" He didn't want to risk Izuku getting shot by him too. By this, Izuku was forced to watch as this mysterious man shot his grandfather in the chest, piercing his heart, killing him instantly. Izuku was so shocked of what he had just seen. He couldn't move. His grandfather had just died in front of him, and he killed a mountain lion for nothing. Black Whip had taken a mama bird away from its babies for nothing. The man then slowly looked towards Izuku, and he started slowly walking towards him. Izuku's heart started beating faster the more this man got closer to him. He then dropped his gun and falls to his knees, now in arm's reach of Izuku. He reaches out and he touches Izuku's left facial cheek. Izuku is shaking, scared for his life. Izuku couldn't even find words to say anything. All he could do was cry, and then suddenly he saw the man drop a tear from his face, even though he was still unable to see it. Izuku sees that this man had left himself open, and then he activates One for All and gives him a Detroit smash, causing him to fly away. When the tension cools down, everyone gathers around Grandfather's body. He was dead, and everyone looked at Izuku in anger, blaming him. Why didn't you save him? You could have done something, but you stood there like a coward. You let your grandfather die. They all start surrounding Izuku, and Izuku says, I wanted to help him, but he told me not to. They all didn't want to hear what Izuku had to say. They kept on ridiculing him and shaming him. Izuku's heart started beating faster, racing. Without saying anything, Izuku just got up and ran away, not caring where he was going, until he found himself a resting spot in a cave with only a few feet of space inside. While outside, a storm was overhead. Izuku puts the eggs down and walks over a few feet and would start raging. He would throw electricity all over the place. He would punch the hard walls over and over again, not even knowing that he's causing even greater harm to himself. Blood would start staining the walls of the cave, and Izuku would be almost tearing his hair out of his head repeatedly, calling himself a failure, angered of his failure to protect the last thing of his family that he had. Izuku would exhaust himself, and he would fall to the ground, curling up into a ball. And he would start remembering that moment when the mysterious man shot his grandfather dead. The bullet from that gun moving in slow motion in his mind. Electricity started shrouding Izuku's body as he said quietly, "Come to me." The electricity around him started glowing brighter and brighter, and he took a deep breath and yelled, "Come to me!" Suddenly, Izuku's body exploded with blue light that turned into a dome. It continued to spread out widely, and it was so powerful that the dome of the light actually spread it out far enough to reach towards his hometown. The light faded away, and Izuku regained his composure, completely unaware of what he had just did. His tears hit the ground, and he gripped a fistful of dirt. "I'm so sorry, grandfather." Suddenly, Izuku felt something hit his lower thigh. He looked, and he sees that it was a small oar. What the heck? He tries to pull it off, but it wouldn't budge. And then another one hit him in his arm. What is this? Soon, another one would hit him, and another, and another. Why is this happening? Suddenly, he hears a loud thud from outside and runs out to investigate. He looks around, and he sees a man laying on the ground with his clothes smoking. He had a red scarf around his neck, and his face was covered by a red cloth functioning like a mask. And he had all sorts of melee weapons around his body. All that metal was attracted towards Izuku. Izuku now notices that it's his electrical power, but he's not aware that he is currently losing control of it. Suddenly, Izuku hears a loud rumbling noise, and he looks in the direction and sees metallic things flying towards him at a dangerous speed, such as cars, light poles, building parts, all that sort of things. Anything that was magnetic was coming right at him. He had to act quickly. He grabbed the man and dragged him into the cave, but it was really hard because all of his weapons kept aiming at him. And at one point the weapons cut Izuku's forearm, but he managed to get the man inside. Thinking that they were safe in the cave, the debris started smashing against the top and side of the cave. The walls were starting to crackle and cave in. Izuku knew that him and the man couldn't stay there, and he was about to leave with the man out of the cave, but he realized that the eggs were still there, just a few feet away from him. The walls were starting to crackle, and he was running out of time. At that moment, time froze for Izuku, and he had to make a choice. Should he save this man who he had never met before, who still has his whole life ahead of him? Or does he save the eggs? The soon-to-be hatchlings, beauty of nature, innocent lives that haven't even had a chance to breathe yet. He couldn't save them both, but then Izuku remembered something important. Wait a minute. I have super speed. He then turns to his wolf form, and then he quickly ushers over towards the eggs, carrying them in his mouth, and then he quickly drags the man out of the cave just in the nick of time as the whole cave caved in. Izuku takes a sigh of relief, but it didn't last very long. His magnetic abilities were still active, and more things started flying towards him. Suddenly, Izuku looks up, and a large boat was about to land on top of him as we fade to black, and then reappear with the strange man waking up with the light of the sun hitting him in the face. He looks around and finds himself outdoor on the ground with a cover, and he sees a fully clothed Izuku looking at him as he was sleeping. Who the hell are you? Izuku says, that's a strange way to thank someone who saved your life. The man tries to move, but he couldn't, for he was in too much pain. Hey, don't move around so much. You have multiple broken bones, but if you move any further, you might end up breaking a rib, and that broken rib might puncture one of your lungs. The man grunts and says, where did you get all those medical supplies? Izuku would tell him that it's from the houses and the boats that damn near crushed them last night. But of course, Stain was unconscious and he didn't know that. Izuku says, now it's my turn to answer. Now it's my turn to ask a question. Who are you? And why were you in rough shape when I found you? Stain says, the man says, I'll tell you what, since I only asked you one question, you only get to ask me one question. Fine then. Who are you? John Smith. That's not your real name. But how the hell do you know? Because no one uses that name anymore. Now, what is your actual name? The man sighs and says, Stain. What kind of name is that? One question, that's it. The two are quiet for a few seconds, and Stain sees Izuku looking at the eggs. He would then ask Izuku for water to distract him. Izuku would put the eggs down, and he would walk off to the spot where he last saw the water. After a few seconds, Stain was struggling to crawl. He looks around and finds his weapons hidden in tall grass, with one of the hilts peeping through the grass. He crawls towards it, and just as he's about to reach for it, he slightly touches the hilt of his sword, and he was hit with electricity. And just as he's wallowing around in pain, he regains his composure and sees Izuku sitting on a rock while sipping a bottle of water. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that I electrified your weapons so that when you touch them, you'll be hit with 30 volts of electricity, enough to knock someone out, along with having them lose bowel controls. You must be pretty strong if you're still in control of your bowels, along with still awake. Impressive. Excuse me. Stain grunts and calls Izuku a bastard and demands him the water. Not with that tone of voice. Now, what's the magic word? Stain grunts and says and mumbles under his breath. Oh, I swear to God, I'm gonna kill you, kid. I'm sorry, what was that? Said Izuku. Stain then said, can I please get some water? Izuku gives him the water, and Stain gulps it down within seconds. Izuku takes Stain back to his resting spot, putting a few cloths under his neck under his head to function as a pillow. After a few minutes, Stain would ask for his name, and Izuku would say, my name's Izuku Kaminari or Midoriya. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Stain would ask, why is it hard to tell? It's my turn to answer a question. Fine. Why were you so beat up when I found you? You sure you want to know that? Yes. Fine. I was being hunted by the biggest scum of the earth, Endeavor. He bested me in a fight and I escaped. So you're a bad guy. I never said that. Well, Endeavor wasn't hunting you for no reason. What did you do? Stain grunts and said, no more questions. Fine then. You need to rest anyway. Get your strength back. Izuku gets up and he picks up the eggs, and Stain would ask, what's with the eggs? Like, why are you so protective over them? I'll answer your question if you answer mine. Never mind, said Stain. After a few minutes of silence, and Stain just staring at Izuku, Izuku sighed and said, fine. I value these eggs because I accidentally killed their mother when a new quirk of mine awoken. I promised her that I'd take care of them until they hatch and are able to fly on their own. A small flashback ensues, and with the nest falling into pieces and the mama bird falling to the ground with her eggs, Izuku snaps back into reality, and he said, I'd rather we not talk about it. Okay. You know, you must be really kind. You must be a really kind... You must have a really kind heart to care for such creatures. I try, but I won't lie. I do have my days when people are feasting on the pleasures of life. I get the indigestion, but I never let that stop me. I just adapt. Usually my brother is always there to cheer me up and help me keep going. Stain would then ask, well, what are you doing out here? Izuku would look at the ground and says, I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, you should get some sleep. Izuku walks off and gets somewhere to himself. About a few weeks would pass, and Izuku would be helping Stain on his walking. Okay, you're doing good, Stain. Hopefully by the end of the day we can go our separate ways. Yeah, hopefully. Listen, Izuku, I just wanted to apologize for my behavior the first time we met. You were just helping me and I gave you trouble. It's okay. We all have our days now and then. Besides, you needed help, and I was there. It was only the right thing to do. Come on. Let's rest our feet. They both sit down and they look at the world around them. They look at the trees and the mountains and the roads. It was a beautiful sight. After a while, Izuku would remind Stain of his question of why he was there. He goes on and explains everything, to the moment that he died and found out that his real mother had been dead, the moment that he found his grandfather, and to the point where he watched a stranger kill his grandfather in front of him. He would start to tear up and Stain would comfort him. Hey, it's okay. The important thing is that you're still alive. You have to keep moving on and keep your family name alive. Keep fighting, keep surviving. Thanks, Stain. A few more days would pass and Izuku would allow Stain to claim his weapons again. Oh, and sorry about electrifying your weapons. Nah, it's fine. I mean, after all, you found a strange man who was unconscious in the woods and all he had was weapons on him. I see where you're coming from. I understand where you were coming from, kid. Anyway, are you sure you feel well enough to move around? Well, I can't improve if I don't walk around more. Besides, I need to get back with my training. Yeah, you're right. In fact, it's been a while since I trained Mike Works too, so I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna go practice my electrical powers and also make sure I don't accidentally shock you. And so, for the past few hours, the two would train. Stain would learn to become more flexible in swinging his blades around, while Izuku would practice on using his electrical powers, along with One For All at its lowest level. Izuku does a few flips and kicks, and he finishes it off with an uppercut, with electricity still engulfing his hand, sending that electricity to the sky, the cloudy sky. And wiping the sweat from his brow, he then rubs both of his hands together for a few seconds, and then suddenly, his hands start emitting the same electrical glow that happens when Fist of God is ready to be used. Izuku looks in terror, remembering the last time they used Fist of God. The cloud starts to roar with a loud thum, and Izuku stood there with his arms up, as still as possible. Stain stopped to inform Izuku of the storm, but when he saw him in the position that he was in, he was confused. He approached Izuku, but Izuku urged him to stay back, and that he has no control over this. Control of what? Asked Stain. Izuku goes on to explain Fist of God, and whatever is blasted by it is no longer existing. Let's just go ahead and say that. Stain, I keep saying Izuku, Stain would suggest that Izuku just uses it and get it over with. It's not like the electricity in the clouds are lasting forever. Izuku agrees, but he urges Stain to get as far away as possible. When he's at a safe distance, Izuku takes in a deep breath and he throws down a punch, but the electricity around his hands still glow. Wait, he can do it again? I gotta get this over with. And so, laying down a barrage of punches, along with more electrical punches from the sky, and this would go on for a few minutes. It looks like things aren't stopping, and Izuku was getting more and more frustrated with it, which caused the electricity in the sky to go haywire and start scattering all over the place. Stain watches in amazement of what he is seeing. The way that the lightning was falling all around Izuku and the wind blowing in his hair, along with the glow that Izuku was emitting, it was almost as if he was a god. Izuku clenches his fist even tighter and a vein pops in his forehead and he shoots electricity to the sky while yelling, "Stop it!" He continues to shoot what looks like an endless amount of electricity, but then, suddenly, Izuku's body was engulfed in electricity and his body disappeared. Where did he go? The storm in the sky continued to roar loudly. Then, Stain heard an echoey voice. "Stain, help me." He looks up and he sees light behind the clouds, and what looked like fingers grabbing the clouds and hoisting itself up. And there Stain was frozen with fear, for he saw a gigantic humanoid thing that looked like it was made out of electricity. It looked down at him with its glowing white eyes. Yet that's all the feature that it has was its eyes, and it didn't have a mouth or ears, just eyes, just looking down at Stain. Suddenly, the figure started reaching towards Stain, but Stain's fight, flight, or freeze kicked in, and he just stood there with fear. But then the figure started flickering in and out of existence. It grunted as if it was in a lot of pain, and then it disappeared. Stain was uncertain what had just happened, but then he sees something falling through the clouds. He looks past the clouds and he sees that it's Izuku falling. He knew that he had to act quickly, and so, running as fast as he can, he then leaps into the air, and then he manages to catch Izuku, but when he landed in his arms, a small cracking noise can be heard from not Stain's arms or his shoulder, but from Izuku, and from what it sounded like, it came from the neck area. An unknown amount of time would pass, and Izuku would wake up. The night was getting closer, and he woke up just in the nick of time, with Stain leaving armed to the teeth. He calls his name in a weak voice. Stain. He turns around and looks down at an injured Izuku. Hey kid, be careful. With your inability to feel pain, you could possibly make your whiplash even worse. What happened? Well, after you went gigantic, you fell from the sky, and when I caught you, you hurt your neck, but that seems to be all the damage. Well, other than your hands being badly hurt, I guess it's a good thing that you can't feel pain. Izuku's head was a bit rattled, but he finds the words to speak. Where are you going? Stain finally tells Izuku about his secret. Look, kid, it's about time that I answer your question about why Endeavor was hunting me. You see, I was just about to murder a fake hero who goes by the name of Ingenium. But why? Well, kid, in my profession, I search and I hunt down people who dare to call themselves heroes, when really they're just the true scum of the earth. Roaches that need to be purged, and tonight, I'm going to hunt a man by the name of Native Down and finish him. He's next on my list. And I will show society who the true heroes are, and All Might. You wouldn't understand. I don't expect you to. I just want you to know real heroism. I'm sorry, but I gotta go. Stain gets up and turns around and is about to leave, but he feels a grip on his red scarf by Izuku. Stain, wait. You can't kill people because you disagree with their motives. The world may be filled with injustice individuals, but we must show. But it's possible. But hang on. We're gonna go try again from Stain wait, and 3, 2, 1. Stain, wait. You can't kill people because you disagree with them and their morals. The world may be filled with people who bring injustice, but we must show that it is people like us that strive to outshine them and show them what real heroism is about. If you kill, you're no better than them or villains. After these past few weeks with you, Stain, I can tell that you're really humble. You're a humble guy, and deep down you care for all life. And I can tell you've had much injustice in your past. More than I can count, but you're never alone. Izuku's grip gets tighter on Stain's scarf as it starts to shake. When I was a boy, my mother was killed in a house fire that was set by a man who was running from a police officer. Yeah, the police officer had a choice to either save me or my mother or go after him. And he chose him over us. The man who set our house ablaze was never caught. I'd do anything to change that day, but my past isn't today. I'm stronger because of what happened, and I refuse to let any other person go through what I went through. Stain thinks for a moment, but just as he's about to say something, Izuku speaks first. Well, as he slowly slips back into consciousness, be the better hero, Stain. Be the better man. Izuku passes out and Stain is once again left alone with his thoughts. Could it be true? Could Stain actually have a chance to turn his life around and change his morals? No, I can't. I've already come this far. I can't turn back now, though there is wisdom in your words, kid. I'm afraid it's too late. I'm sorry, Izuku. He leaves, and Izuku is now left alone. We slowly zoom in at Izuku's face, and we fade to black. Izuku finds himself in the spirit world with the previous users of One For All. Nana would go on... Nana, what's going on? Nana places a hand on Izuku's shoulder and says, "There's no time to explain. Stain is going to murder your brother." "What? You have to get up and save him now." "But I can't. My body won't move." Nana says, "It's not you that move your body, Izuku. It's your heart and spirit. Do you remember that day that you saved your brother from the sludge man?" "Yeah. At that moment when Death Arms tried to stop you, it was your heart and spirit that moved you. You just have to focus. Let it take control." Izuku closes his eyes and he focuses. He starts thinking about that moment when his grandfather died, and even though he told him not to save him, he knew that he couldn't blame himself for his death, and he refuses to let anyone else down or let anything bad happen to his brother. And even though they may not be full brothers, that never mattered. They were there for each other, and they supported one another. And he is not going to stay down. In the real world, Izuku awakened God mode. His body started emitting One For All electricity. His eyes started to glow with a bright light, and rocks and debris started floating all around him. He levitated a foot off the ground and then onto his feet. With a look of determination on his face, he gets in a track running position and he runs, and as he's running, a stream of electricity flurries behind him, and in 10 seconds he finds himself back in his hometown. His eyes continue to glow, and he listens to the voice of Nana Shimura on where to go, and soon He finds the alleyway and sees Stain with his blade raised over his head, about to stab down towards his brother Denki, who was in the path of Stain's blade. Izuku's eyes go back to normal and he is fully awakened. And he runs in and he leaps into the air, landing on top of his brother Denki and taking the blade for him as the blade pierces his right shoulder. Denki opens his eyes and he looks down to where the blade had pierced Izuku. He then looks up at Izuku and says his name. Izuku? Izuku then said, "Hey." And that's going to do it for this episode of What If Deku Was a Storm Wolf. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed, and I hope to see you all in the next episode. Goodbye.